And basically, it's a glossary of crypto investing, financial terms, and concepts. It's using Hive as a decentralized database. And it has a main page, which right now has about 330 terms.
About you and what you're involved in. You wanted to come on the show, obviously to say hello and stuff, but there were some other things that were on your mind that you wanted to talk about. So why don't you let us know about that, and then we'll go on to the rest of the agenda afterwards.
Yeah, well, what it is, it's nowhere near as mammoth a project as you guys are undertaking. But maybe before I go into it a little bit, what it is, let me describe why it is, or what the thought process is. And basically, I'm hoping this becomes a proof of concept for Hive, and other communities, other projects pick up on it and can utilize it. And really, what it is it's taken Hive at its base level, at its core, which, if you strip everything away from Hive, what is Hive? It's a blockchain. It's distributed ledger technology, and it's a permissionless blockchain. And unlike other ledgers like Bitcoin, which resembles like a bank ledger because it's just transactions going back and forth, that's all Bitcoin is storing. Hive actually is more like Twitter or Facebook, where it stores or Medium, it stores our articles, it stores our comments, it stores our upvotes. It has all this additional information in the ledger. And so what I did is I started to undertake a project through Leo Finance. I'm using the Leo Finance front end, and doing this in an effort to help Leo Finance's ranking in the search engines, which, of course, since the stuff is being pushed through to the Hive blockchain, it would also help ECNC, it would also help PeakD, it would also help HiveBlog. And the third, I guess you could say, function of this, or goal of this, is to actually have a resource center, an educational center, a point of reference for people to go to. And that is the background of why I undertook this. And when we look at, especially in the world of Leo Finance, which is crypto, which is finance and investment, but if we look at financial and investing terms and concepts, and you enter them into the search engine, what comes up? Investopedia. If we enter in other terms for, basically anything else that comes up, Wikipedia. And so the idea is that these things have a lot of value to search engines. So what I started was called LeoGlossary. And basically, it's a glossary of crypto investing, financial terms, and concepts. And what I'll do is I'll drop this to you. Sorry, Matt, I threw it in the talk to you instead of in the room. But what it is basically it's using Hive as a decentralized database. And so what I've done is I've started to create these definitions, these terms, and write-ups on Hive. And it's through this project called LeoGlossary. And it has a main page, which right now has about 330 terms, and all of them have links to their own URL. And contained in the definition or the write-up or the explanation of that term are other links. So what we're basically doing is we're copying the Wikipedia Investopedia idea, where this morning I wrote an article pertaining to this, and I just typed in Alan Alda into Wikipedia. The first paragraph has 24 links to other Wikipedia pages. So Wikipedia has internal links upon internal links upon internal links, and so does Investopedia. And so what I'm putting together is an easy-to-use reference guide, if you will, glossary, which is an educational center, tells you about what delegated proof of stake is, or proof of stake, or proof of work, or Bitcoin, or things of that nature. But they're all linked to Leo Finance content. the hope is people will start using this in their blog posts, in their comments, as a way to create more links internally for Leo Finance, for PeakD, for Hive Blog, for any of these front ends. Now, obviously, Leo Finance gets the ranking since that's where it originated from. It gets a little more of the weight. But the idea is to start to enhance the value of Leo content and Hive-based content onto the search engines. At the same time, we're creating an immutable database that cannot be taken down, that's on over 100 different computers around the world simultaneously. They sync up and they update. So nobody can go after this content. Granted, cryptocurrency definitions isn't really a primary target, but you get my point where the immutability, this content is out there as long as the blockchain is running, and it's permissionless. So anybody can pull the content, the glossary, and integrate it into any of their apps, any of their blogs, anything that they want to do. And my post this morning talked about, for years we've been saying, well, we could build Wikipedia on Hive. It's possible, and it's a mammoth undertaking, and certainly it would be. But this is kind of a way to start that process, because you guys talk about breakaway communities. You talk about breakaway communities with their own token, thus with their own economy. And how about those breakaway communities, not only with their own token, but with their own decentralized database? So, for example, the photography community, just off the top of my head. You have photography, and all of a sudden they create up a glossary of all these photography terms and photography concepts, and it's posted on Hive, and it's starting to rank in the search engines there. Then you have Cine TV build something similar to IMDb, and you have all of a sudden sports people, and they start to do this for different sports. Or let's say Real Madrid starts a community, fans of that, and they start posting about the different players and the history of the players, and how many goals were scored and how many assists and that type of thing. And you get all this data that's on this decentralized database that's open, and anybody can start to integrate the data into what they're doing, and it's immutable. It's out there. Plus, we have the linking concept and the linking capability for keyword relevance. I mean, how nice would it be to have a Leo Finance or a Hive-based link at the top of blockchain, at the top of cryptocurrency? So if somebody typed in cryptocurrency into Google, there's a Hive link or a Leo Finance link, or Hive itself, or cryptocurrency, or delegated proof of stake, or blockchain, or any of these terms that we use over and over. Hive-backed dollar, stable coin. And as I said, there's over 330 of them. And before I come up for air, I'm probably going to be over 1,000 to really give a nice foundation, and then go through and start linking them all, and go to back articles that I've written, and start adding them to comment sections of other people's articles, and then of course adding more to the content of each definition or each write-up. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's really interesting. First of all, it's clarified a mystery to me, because I've seen all these things popping up on chain, like the definition of this, what's the definition of that, and I'm like, who the hell's doing this?
Now you know. And one other thing, just to, before you get to your point, Matt. And this kind of shows how Hive works, how projects work, and how we can really expand out. So I started doing this, which, by the way, I only got 2 rejections from doing this when I sought permission. Do you know who rejected it? The Hive blockchain twice, because I ran out of resource credits. And so the blockchain says, sorry, you can't post this content till you get a resource credit. So I had to delegate to my account twice more. But anyway, so I start doing this, and I put together a video, and Cal sees it. And Cal, I didn't talk to him about it. I didn't do anything. I just started doing this on my own. And Cal says, you know what? I'm putting this on our roadmap with the developers for leofinance.io. And he says, I don't know how quickly it'll be done, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the developers start to pull this content. So anytime anybody's writing a blog post or a comment through leofinance.io, if they type in the word cryptocurrency, the link will pop up where they just click on the link and it's automatically linked in their article or their comment. And it's like, okay, well, there's somebody who looked at it, took the idea and ran with it, and that is adding another layer. So, I mean, that's how this stuff works when you talk about cooperative, blockchains, open source projects. And if you notice, you saw all those posts come through, Matt. I mean, it's set to decline. So, I mean, this is not done to make money. It's not done for me to start to personally benefit financially, at least directly. It's done because I got a shitload of Leo. I got a fair portion of Hive. It helps the ecosystem, and it starts to put the idea out there, as I said, a proof of concept. Hopefully other people start to look at this and say, you know what, maybe we can get, our own group ranking by focusing on different keywords and different ways of getting links and building a bigger ecosystem in terms of with the search engines that they start to notice us. And I've already gotten, this thing only started 2 weeks ago or 13 days, 12 days ago. And I've already gotten a couple things on Google, a couple things on Bing, nothing major, but, the content's only 12 or 13 days old.
That's incredible. That's truly incredible. It's almost like Hive needs just a slight additional layer where anyone can add and take away from these definitions. So it's not just taskmasters. Like Taskmaster made the initial entry, but then anyone can go through and edit that stuff, and it can then be like reputation driven. So it's like if your reputation's good, then you're going to have order of precedence over your definition of something compared to someone else, maybe.
Well, certainly you could do something like that. Obviously, the next phase is after I get this to the point that I'm comfortable and somebody steps up if they'd like to participate, then it's just a matter of giving the posting key and getting a team. And so it's not really a decentralized project in the sense of anybody can participate in a wiki. And as somebody mentioned, one of the comments to a post I wrote, the problem with what you're saying there is there could be then the threat of somebody spam, somebody puts up some real, conspiracy stuff. And if you look at it and step back from the collective and look at it from a collective perspective, yes, this is somewhat right now it's totally centralized. It's me, which is the key. But let's say I get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people working on this. But then somebody starts to work on another database of sports. And then somebody else works on another database of U.S. presidents or U.K. prime ministers, or somebody starts, hell, you get the foodie group. They start putting up recipes for, chicken parmesan or whatever. And you start to get all these different databases of information out there. And a lot of this information, a lot of what I'm putting up won't change. Like when if I put up a definition of a put or a call or a stock option, that doesn't change over time. So once it's in there, it's there, it doesn't change. Now, something like, and I link to a Hive post, but I'm going to write up a new Hive post for LeoGlossary. And I figure I probably am going to have around 40 links just in that post alone. So can you imagine how many times a day do we write the word Hive on Hive comments, on Hive blog posts? And if each time that happened, somebody did that, they put up a link where it has another 40 links to all this LeoGlossary content. And that's how I would envision that hopefully over the next half year, as a lot of this content starts to age, as we start to get more links and all that going, all of a sudden there's some key terms that if people go into Google and search, they're brought to Hive. And they're brought to these definitions and they're brought to this information. And it's like, okay, well, that'll help funnel them in. And that's really what's missing, in my opinion, is I don't think we get a lot of organic traffic to the Hive front ends.
Yeah, that's very interesting. One of the things I'm looking forward to from this is as you do this and you get really slick at it, which I'm assuming you're probably not far from at the moment, you're going to be able to write content that other people can see about how you formulated this, what the principle behind it is, what you're trying to do, and then exactly what steps you take to do it generically from the Leo finance point of view, so that someone else can then take that exact method and copy it for the other things that you're talking about, and do it with confidence, you know?
Yeah, let me get into. Did you post the link in CTT, Matt?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and here's another thing off your conversation yesterday. Your recording that really struck me is you guys were talking about something, and you said. I think you said it, Matt. You said it's very simple, and I think Dan said something to the effect that, well, simple is good because it does, we can't mess it up or something to that effect. And if you look at that page, all that page is was just the initial LeoGlossary post. And I've been updating it multiple times throughout the day. And it went from one word, basically a one word, or, the header, and then one word as the initial post. And over the last 2 weeks, it's just grown and grown and grown. And that's, I call it the main menu, because there's no website associated with this. There's no outside project associated with this. This is just a initial post on Leo Finance by this LeoGlossary account, and it's just expanding. You click on one of those links, like you click on, let's say, transaction, and it opens up an explanation of transaction, and in there is like 25 different links back to other things that are all tied on that main menu. So it just creates it creates the king of circle jerks, if you will. I mean, that's what Wikipedia is. You go read a Wikipedia page and you read it from start to finish. There's going to be 50 or 75 links, all to other Wikipedia content. And it's just sending the search engines down all these different paths. And, the longer they stay there, from what I understand, the better it is. And that's what it is. It's a very simple project. Anybody can duplicate this. And as you said, you saw the links flying by, and you're like, these posts, and you're like, what is all this stuff? Well, that's what this stuff is.
Yeah, it would be good to make this sort of a standard for Hive, make it front ends encourage this type of behavior, maybe have a rating system. Because if you were to start doing that on all your posts, that's going to make a big difference in the SEO. And since Hive doesn't have a centralized marketing team, if you can make your posts appeal to get more traffic and basically be more valuable, because content, it has two measurements: the quality of the content, the information, if you learn anything, and the reach it gets, right? If no one sees it, then it's not very valuable. So I think curators should definitely be encouraging people, their favorite artists or their favorite content creators, to say, hey, you should look at what Taskmaster's doing, what they're doing over at Leo Finance, and sort of copy it for your communities. And since it's all collaborative, they're saying, well, yeah, this will make our community, become more, broader, more awareness. And at the same time, curators will be on the hunt for it. So it's a win-win. But these are smart ideas to get the most out of every piece of content, because that content goes on chain, it's immutable, and you want to make sure you're packing as much juice as you can into every post to try to get the most out of it for the long term.
Yeah, and this is something that I know about. I know about, obviously, crypto, and I've spent years with investing in finance and banking and economics. But I couldn't write anything about really science or math. But what if the STEM Geeks group and the people who know about mathematics or know about biology or chemistry or whatever, they started doing this for STEM Geeks? And okay, granted, the audience, like you were saying, Dan, the reach, the audience isn't going to be as big as, let's say, investing or financial matters. But what happens if STEM Geeks starts to rank in, chemistry terms and chemistry concepts and all that stuff, or biology or engineering or physics or whatever? Because there's people in STEM Geeks who know about mathematics and science and all that stuff, and they can put together this type of database. And over time, STEM Geeks becomes the expert to Google for all this scientific stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if teachers and schools can get a hold of this, they're probably going to think the technology is neat. You see what happened with Steve Truss. He found Hive, found it very fascinating. So, yeah, it might not have the appeal of business or even sports, but it could have very large impacts in getting you in universities, getting Hive known by specific categories of people that can, each individual is of high quality in terms of what they could bring to Hive. Because we definitely want Hive to be studied more. We want these institutions looking at it, understanding what real Web3 is, dissecting coin voting, teaching people the principles of Web3. So yeah, any kind of content that can reach its niche in a maximum capacity, or as close to as possible, is what's desirable. And this is the way to do it. You know? Pack as much punch into each post. That's the way I would think about it. If you're making a post, make sure you pack as much of it as you can. Are you making sure you're going to have, you know, reach as many people as you can? Are you making sure it's as quality as you think it could be? Are you, poshing, sharing on Twitter, sharing on all the other social medias, trying to get the most out of every post? You know, that's what curators are looking for, and it's what makes your post stand out. And it's going to help the communities that you're in.
Also, from a search engine standpoint, from what I understand, the body of the post and the comment section of the post is treated the same. It does not distinguish it because it's all one page. So even if the author doesn't do a lot to optimize the post itself, you can go through, and as a commenter, you can add applicable comment. So let's say Dan, especially on a video, because obviously there's very little text, but let's say Dan puts together a video where he's talking about proof of stake in Ethereum. Well, you can take those links from LeoGlossary and write up a comment. Yeah, Dan, Ethereum really is going to have problems with their switch to proof of stake, and coin voting is going to be difficult, blah, blah, blah. And then you link the appropriate terms in there to LeoGlossary, and it's like you had put that in the main body of the text. So commenters can actually help this process along by every time they leave a comment, maybe adding a couple different links to it to help, and it has to be pertinent. So if the article talks about blockchain, put in blockchain or cryptocurrency or distributed ledger technology or network or something like that applies to blockchain. And all of a sudden you just made that whole post more valuable.
That sounds like you could have a reward. Like the way Posh rewards people for posting to Twitter. It's almost like you could have a rewards token for people credibly posting to this system as well, to update it, to add to it.
You could. I mean, I think, and one of you two may have to correct me if I'm wrong, but there was that project, I think it was Everpedia, and that was the idea to produce Wikipedia on blockchain.
That was on
but
EOS.
Now, excuse me?
That was on EOS, yeah.
It was on EOS? Okay. And you could think of something. I guess the idea was, well, maybe you could proof of brain that, or somehow incentivize people contributing to that. And I guess you theoretically could add a layer 2 token to something like this. So if a community, let's say the photography community, wanted to add another layer for people working on their database, they could actually create a token, like you said, the Posh token, but instead of rewarding for marketing on Twitter, this particular token is for those people working on the photography database and trying to optimize their content or whatever. So it goes right back to that, what is all of this about? You guys talk about it all the time. What is Speak Network? It's decentralized infrastructure that's incentivized for people to offer the infrastructure. That's what Speak Network is. You're incentivizing people to provide infrastructure for what you're building. And that's what blockchain is. What do the block producers do? They're on Hive. They're incentivized to provide this infrastructure to keep Hive running. And it's just like, what is Posh? Well, Posh is incentivizing people to share their content on Twitter. So it's all just comes back to the same fundamentals of blockchain, which is decentralized data storage, community adding to it, and then the incentivization mechanisms that we put in place. And, then it ties into governance, like you said, with coin voting or whatever you want to tangent off into that. But on Hive, it's still that same decentralized blockchain, community adding whatever it is, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's content, whether it's curation, and then the incentivization mechanisms that are in place and toying with them.
Mm-hmm. It'd be cool if front ends took the ball and ran with it, where it was sort of like, if you're a new user, even an experienced user, when you go, it'll have sort of like little pop-ups. So say, oh, if you do this, you could potentially earn Posh tokens if you share, or if you do this, you could potentially earn more tokens, or the power of your post levels up. Just sort of encourage users to maximize their posts and sort of parameter them down the line, saying, hey, you know, this is what you do Y, you do A, B, C, D, and then before you know it, you have a sort of like when you complete a profile. It's like your post isn't complete. It's not as good as it could be. If you could do these sort of things to make your post even better. So if we could have front end sort of thinking in that area, I think that'd be pretty cool.
Or even if, just thinking off the top of my head, if somebody built a front end that did that, you know, like kind of an optimizing front end where it goes through and it allows you, because it has certain basics of SEO and stuff like that in it, where all of a sudden, you know, it doesn't matter what you write your post from. If you write it through Peak D, that's fine. But then you go to this other front end and you pull up your post, and it kind of gives you the red mark, say, okay, you want to link this and you want to change that and you want to do this. And, you know, I don't know, maybe that's just impossible to build. But, you know, these are some of the things that as we start down this path, it's like, well, if the information's there, anybody can grab it. This LeoGlossary is not exclusive to Leo Finance, because Hive Blog or Peak D or Ecency can all pull the data. It's on the blockchain. It's not exclusive to Leo Finance. So anybody can run with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Something more universal, where you're almost like a plugin, where you can pull it up on any front end and just sort of correct your post, or not correct it, but encourages. Oh, you can do this, that, and this, and then other people who want to tokenize like Posh can sort of integrate and say, hey, you know, I want people to know they can earn Posh for sharing, etc.
That's right. It's almost like a plugin where if you're writing a term, or you're writing something that could have important links to it, maybe some scientific definition or something that could be referenced in the future, you want to get to the point where people's automatic thought, just general users, is like, oh, I'm writing this term, let me just check the glossary to see if it's in there. And I type the word into the glossary and it doesn't show up. So now I can type that word and type the definition and bang it onto the right tag, and it includes it in the indexer for the glossary. And now everyone can contribute to it like that.
Yeah, and even if you set up your own, let's say, even if it's like your own glossary, because you happen to write a lot about math and science, so you pull the math and science up, or you set up your own. Well, I know I use the word cryptocurrency. I use Hive. I use HBD. I use blockchain. I use immutable. I use database. These are the terms I use a lot. I build my own glossary, so then it's just a matter of the plugin, just each time it does it, it's like, okay, it does the linking for me, for these 25 terms or whatever I put in my library.
So I can see for the word glossary, there's been like 25 different users that have defined it, and I can go and read each one and maybe select the highest ranking one, or select people whose names that I know and things like that.
What I'm thinking is you have your own library, Matt, because every time you write an article, you use the word blockchain, let's say. And so thus, you have your own library where blockchain's in. It already has the link you want, and so each time you put it in there, maybe it just highlights it. You click over it, boom, it puts the link right into your article, and you're all said and done. And if you use something that you don't typically write about, well, then maybe you have to go find your link, and it suggests them to you. But stuff you commonly use, you're always sending it to the same place. But Ruben in the room said there's no penalty for publishing duplicated content in SEO, but there are consequences for ranking and listing duplicated articles. Right now, we have a few interfaces, but as Hive grows, we'll attract more platforms that decide to build on Hive. Having unmanageable Google SE listings may be an issue in the future. And yes, that's true. That's why where the content originates from gets the higher weighting. So I'm putting this through, this particular database is going through Leo Finance, so that gets heavier weighting than Peak D will. But if I put this all through Peak D and Leo Finance picked it up, that would not get as much of a weighting. So the duplicated content is penalized a little bit, but I think it's more where it comes from as a start. That's my understanding anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure about SEO, but I think that I know it's very good, and we need to utilize anytime people are typing in these keywords, we want to sort of be that go-to. And once you get enough awareness around keywords, maybe even create forums. I know those are sort of like a hybrid digital community. But anyway, to show up on these search engines and everywhere, it's going to be good. Keep in mind, folks, we don't have centralized marketing, so we need to utilize all the social aspects of the chain and maximize as much as possible.
Well, and that's the other. This is where I said I initially started and said this is a proof of concept, because I figured if I just went out and did this, even though it's a pain in the ass, and I showed it, not only could other people see if it's a success, other people might duplicate it. All of a sudden people start just brainstorming, and as we've done on this call and people are doing in the rooms, people are talking about it and adding ideas, and Dan has ideas, Matt has ideas, Cal saw it, he had an idea, and all of a sudden there may be some people who start running with this, and it's there. So add to it, take it, do whatever you want with the data, improve on it.
Agreed.
So Tass, tell me, as you started this off, right, I've got this image in my mind of you had no intentions with this. You just kind of started writing your own glossary for financial terms because you know those things. You're like, well, I might as well get something on Hive. And then you were like, as you were writing it, you were probably like, oh shit, this is bigger than just this glossary. And then you start to think about it. It's like, oh my gosh, this is actually quite a big, a major deal, and it's worth talking about to people. So is that the way it happened, or did you plan it first and write out the glossary afterwards?
Well, the idea of a glossary, it goes back a number of years. That was initially what I proposed to Cal, and I sent Cal about, probably 30 pages of different words and definitions, all in the financial arena. And that's some of where LeoPedia came from. But that kind of got on the back burner, then kind of went to different directions and all this other stuff. And so finally, I just said, you know what, fuck it. I'll just do it myself. And I figured out a simple way to do it. And I said, okay, as I was starting to brainstorm, what is Hive? What is database? What are decentralized databases? It dawned on me that, I could just go ahead and do this myself and very easily. And you're correct. I looked at it as a way of helping Leo Finance, as a way of helping SEO rankings and search engine rankings, and see what we could do to get more links going. And I haven't even started. I have not put this on Twitter yet. I haven't done any of that. I'm still trying to get to that point where maybe by the end of this coming week, I'll start to put stuff out on Twitter about it. But you're right, Matt. As I'm going through it, I'm like, this is something that is easily duplicatable. And Cine TV was obviously something that came to mind, because initially when Raymond and I had conversations about that, Raymond Speaks, IMDb was one of the things, International Movie Database was one of the things that we talked about and came to mind. And so as I'm going through this, that's one of the things saying, it'd be a lot more work for them, but they could go through their own URL, Cine TV, and produce something like this right on their own platform. And so it kind of then took on the proof of concept. Then all of a sudden I got the response from Cal, and it's like, okay, this is just another reaffirmation of what blockchain and cooperative and community is all about. Somebody throws out an idea, somebody starts on a project, and somebody else has an idea that they can implement and integrate into their project. And I will tell you the other thought that came to my mind as I'm doing all these terms and I'm starting to use the terms and going back and forth. I've listened to every CTT broadcast, and I've listened to, I think, almost all of Dan. I've listened to all of Dan's videos and audios probably since he started doing them hardcore again 3 years ago. And I'll tell you what, Matt, every time I typed the word immutability, I heard Dan's voice. So to me, he's no longer, they call me Dan, he's Mr. Immutability. He should change his Twitter to Mr. Immutability, because I just keep hearing him talk about immutable text, immutable data, immutable blockchain, immutable. And it's like, but he's absolutely correct. It is immutable. All that data is there. And guess what? It's not going anywhere. What happens is Investopedia, and I put in my article this morning, Wikipedia, I'm sure all of us have seen the banner headlines of only like 0.2% of anybody gives money and donates money to Wikipedia. Help us keep the door open or whatever. What if Wikipedia gets shut down by AWS or Investopedia? I started this. I needed no permission. I needed no infrastructure. I put $0 in it. I just put time in. And I know this is going to keep going because as long as there's somebody, I mean, my database is on your guy's computer. It's on CTP's computer. It's on BlockTrade's computer. It's on Howoo's computer. It's on, 100 different computers around the world. Every time I hit submit and update, within whatever it is, 45 seconds when that block is irreversible, the whole database is, or the whole blockchain's been updated. That database is just ongoing.
This is a really interesting point you're making. Like obviously with the text immutability, it's key, and it distinguishes it from everything else, which I'm super excited about because, like you say, you see the manipulation that happens on Wikipedia, and it's just ridiculous. There's no accountability, and this would provide that accountability, and it would make it immutable text. But not only that, the thing that I like about what you just said is that Dan talking about immutability, because he does say Hive is probably the best text storage mechanism out there for immutable text storage at very, 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 very low cost. It's amazing, second to none. And yeah, he talks about it. But the thing is, guys like you go away and you've got this annoying voice of Dan just going, immutability, immutable text, immutable text. And eventually, like 2 years down the line, you go, you know what? I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that immutable text to actually do something simple, practical that I can do that works. And boom, now you're going to have people, and that's going to ripple onto other people, probably mirroring what you do and doing it for their own niches. It's massively important stuff. And this is, sometimes I feel a bit like a broken record on these CTT shows, but it's all for good reason, because the ideas that are being put out here and the people listening to these ideas, they might hear them a couple of times. They might not hear them at all. And then one day, 6 months after we first mention it, they might hear it. But it's going to, those little subliminal tidbits in people's minds are going to make them take actions in the future that maybe they wouldn't have thought about previously until they got reassured several times by listening to shows like this and listening to Dan's rants that it's like, hold on a minute, I can actually just do this on Hive, and it's really pretty easy. And I know enough about the features of Hive because we've listened to shows like CTT and Dan's rants and consumed other people's media on Hive, like yourself and people like Addicted and Shadows Pub and people like this that know about the chain, know what it can do. I just think it's great. It's a great reaffirming system like that, and I think it's fantastic that someone like you has recognised that. You heard Dan banging on about immutable text so many times that it's just made you go, yeah, actually, I could just do this, and you've just gone and done it.
Well, it's that, and also if I can add one other layer, which I think is a huge layer in this conversation. To me, when we talk about Web3, I think the misinterpretation that most people have about Web3 is they sit there and simply say, oh, it's a token. And this is where the joke comes in, Web 2.5, Web 2.75, where they just take, okay, well, we'll take this centralized entity and add a token to it, and now it's Web 3. To me, Web 3 is about the decentralization of the data, decentralized databases. And this is why I wrote, we could replace Twitter when you think about it with Hive, because what is Twitter? Twitter is a database of 15 years worth of people's tweets and information. And it's a front end. It's twitter.com. Now you only have one front end, but if we take all that information, put it on a decentralized database, Hive could take out Twitter, because then you could have 20 different front ends all reading the same data, just like we have 4, 5, 6 front ends all reading all the medium style posts, if you will. And at the end of the day, if somebody says to me, what is Web3? It starts with that decentralized storage, that decentralized data that is immutable, that is outside the control of any one entity. And then you have a bunch of front ends that, if they so desire, can tap into that. And so Leo Finance is not the controller of the data. Leo Finance is just a front end that reads the data. Maybe it was created through Leo Finance, but PeakD could create the same thing to read. So could HiveBlog, so could Ecency, so could whatever.